So, all right, welcome. So on behalf of Seattle AWIS, I want to welcome you to our May chapter program. My name is Retha Weeks, and I am on the Seattle AWIS board, and I'm the Seattle AWIS treasurer. But in addition to AWIS welcome you, I also want to welcome Organization of Regulatory and Clinical Associates, and they are an organization that is co-hosting this program tonight, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about that organization as we proceed on. So Seattle monthly programs are open to the public, members and non-members. They're free. They're for women and men. We believe in the importance of bringing people together to share ideas and get acquainted. So I welcome those of you that are joining us in person, but we also have an audience out there on Zoom. So my welcome is extended to them as well. And one step toward getting to know each other is to find out a little bit about each of you in the room. So I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and this will give our speakers a little idea about who's in the audience. And those of you on Zoom, if you're in gallery view, you can raise hands and you'll be able to see the answers to these questions. So first of all, how many of you are AWIS members? How many of you are ORCA members? A few, and I'm a member of both. And then we'd like to know a little bit more about your area of work or greatest interest. So how many of you are in the biological or environmental fields? Okay, interesting. How many of you are in computer tech or engineering? We have a good division there. And then of particular interest to our ORCA people, how many of you have ever participated in a clinical trial? And I ask that question because ORCA members are the people that include clinical associates, clinical professionals who are responsible for handling all the details that are involved in clinical trials. Okay, so my goal is I hope that you met a few people before the program started. There will be time to chat and eat again afterwards. So I hope you'll introduce yourself to someone new or to someone who had similar interests based on our little survey. But finally, to get you thinking about our program topic, I have a fun little quiz related to science communication. So Seattle can claim to be home to a very famous science communicator, and that's Bill Nye the Science Guy. He had televised shows that began in 1993. They lasted for 5 seasons, and his 100 half-hour shows earned him 19 Emmys during that period of time. So my question to you is, what was Bill Nye's Seattle job before he went full-time into TV production? So you have 4 choices here. He was a consultant for NASA. He was an engineer with Boeing, a marine researcher with NOAA at the Northwest Fisheries Science Center, or he was a high school chemistry teacher. So pick your answer. We're actually going to raise hands. I'm very curious as to what you think. So how many think that Bill Nye was a consultant for NASA? Oh, okay, nobody. Engineer with Boeing. Okay, good number. A marine researcher with NOAA. Ah, only a few. High school chemistry teacher. Okay, that was the winning vote for our audience, for those of you who couldn't see their answers. But in actuality, he was an engineer with Boeing, and he worked on the hydraulic systems for 747s. Okay, and so Bill Nye had the ability to make science accessible, engaging, and entertaining. And those are the things that we hope to achieve every time we try to communicate our science. So tonight we're going to be hearing from our program speakers, and they are going to offer some techniques that will help us achieve some of these goals in science communication. But before we introduce our speakers, I would like to give our program hosts a chance to introduce their organizations. So you're going to hear from Dr. Tracy Popowicz, who is the Seattle AWIS president, and then you'll hear from David Liu, who is a board member for ORCA. So Tracy.
Great. Thanks for being here tonight, and thanks for joining us online if you're on Zoom. So just a little bit about Seattle AWIS before we get started. So since 1971, National AWIS has been a resource network and voice for women in science, technology, engineering, and math fields. And our impact on the success of women in STEM continues with 30 nationwide chapters. So Seattle is one of those chapters, and we've been supporting women in STEM since 1985. Whoops. I thought there was another slide. So we have many programs. So we run monthly events like the one that you're attending tonight. And these are free and welcome. Everyone is welcome. And we try to offer a hybrid option as well. So it's great if you can also join us on Zoom. We do a Girls in Engineering, Math, and Sciences, or GEMS program. And it's a program for 7th and 8th grade girls who are interested in STEM fields, and we try to encourage that interest. We also do mentoring for adult women. So groups of 5 to 7 women commit to meeting monthly to support one another and work with an experienced mentor. And then we offer scholarships. So amounts of $1,000 and more. And these are open to women who are majoring in a STEM field and will be juniors or seniors at a 4-year college or university in the state of Washington. And we'll be giving away these scholarships at our awards and banquet event on June 17th. Our awards and banquet committee provides this time that we can celebrate people who are being awarded scholarships as well as awards in different fields. So this year we have 3 award winners. Our banquet will be June 17th at the UW Center for Urban Horticulture. Dr. Sarah Keller will be given an award in Science, Technology, Advancement, and Leadership. Dr. Allison Feeder will receive an award for Early Career Achievement in STEM, and Dr. Agnieszka Miguel will receive the award for Excellence in STEM Education and Outreach. So that date again is June 17th at 6:30 at the UW Center for Urban Horticulture. We're still looking for table sponsors. So it would be wonderful if you or a group of friends or maybe your company could provide support as a table sponsor. And there are different sponsorship levels available. The individual ticket sales are now open, and you can see the website here. And also that would be available on our AWIS website. So we just want to remind you that Seattle AWIS has a vision in which the world, we have the vision for a world where Seattle women of all ages are actively supported in STEM hobbies, studies, and careers. We believe that the entire Seattle community will benefit when women are positively represented, compensated, and recognized for their achievements in all STEM pursuits. It's our mission to create a broad, interdisciplinary, welcoming environment to advance the careers of women in science and technology and promote the participation of girls in STEM. So come join us. We are a volunteer-run organization. So we would love to have your input as a volunteer or as a donor. And you can learn more about that on our website, or you could scan this QR code present here.
All right. Hey, everyone. I know I'm sort of standing between you and the main event, so I'll be relatively fast. My name is David Liu. I'm the guy sitting back there, sort of competing for your attention with the food. I think the food may be winning so far, but I'm a board member at ORCA. ORCA is the Organization of Regulatory and Clinical Associates. And the mission of ORCA is really to help build community and provide networking opportunities for professionals in regulatory affairs, clinical research, quality assurance, and other adjacent areas. And we do so by providing events and webinars, and either through hosting, co-hosting, sponsoring. We also provide mentorship opportunities, and we also provide educational opportunities, including opportunities to kind of work together and help people work toward their industry certifications as kind of listed here. A little bit about ORCA really quickly. ORCA is a nonprofit organization. We are really focused on our local community, serving members in some of these areas as listed here. And we have a lot of different events. A couple of our bigger events are coming up. We are partnering with Women in Bio for an event in August. The exact date is to be determined. And we also will be having our annual banquet on September 5th. So definitely check out the website, orcanw.org, for more information about ORCA as well as information about the banquet. Last slide, again, just kind of moving pretty fast here, is I want to kind of highlight the Martha Feldman Award. Martha Feldman is the founder of ORCA in 1983, I believe. And this award is really to, quote, recognize a passionate professional in our community who has contributed to the field of regulatory affairs and or clinical research and really has supported their colleagues. So nominations are open through the end of the month. You don't have to be an ORCA member to nominate someone, and that person doesn't have to be a member themselves. And if you don't know who to nominate, you could also nominate yourself as well. So there's definitely someone to nominate. But there's more information about that on our website again, orcanw.org, and we have our QR code here as well. Right, thank you.
Okay. So our program tonight features science communication, and it really couldn't be a more important topic. And right now, the positive opinion of the public with regard to scientists, with regard to the process of science, and to scientific data has been declining. And tonight we're going to be hearing from Samantha Borhe, Teresa Flores, and Audra Sisak. And they're going to teach us how to better connect with audiences so that we can convey our messages through storytelling, through comedy, and through improv. And rather than me telling you about their backgrounds, I've asked each of them to tell us a little bit about their background, their career path. And then I'd like to ask you to take notes while they're speaking if you're going to have questions. Each of them will come up and give their little presentation, and then we will ask them all to come forward and we'll take questions from the audience and also from the chat on Zoom. So take note as they're going on. And then we also want to invite you to, when it is time to take questions, we're going to invite you to come to the microphone. So at this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Samantha Borhe.
Thank you for having me. Like Retha said, my name is Samantha Borhe. I am a molecular engineering PhD candidate at UW, but more importantly, at least for me, I am a proud member of Engage UW, which is a student-run organization run by grad students and for grad students who are passionate about science communication and improving SciComm education at UW. One of the core pieces of our work is a course that we teach. It's a grad student course, a full credit course, where grad students learn how to present their cutting edge research to the public and also work with microphones. And one of the core pieces of that class is learning how to tell a story, which is what I'm here to share with you all today. And I want to start by presenting to you two versions of the story of this event. Version one goes like this. In 2019, Samantha Borja came to the University of Washington to pursue a PhD. A few years into her program, she applied for a spot in a class called Communicating Science to the Public, run by Engage. She was able to speak at Burke-Gilman Brewery and Town Hall Seattle because of this class. She also was able to join Drug Discovery News as a science writing intern and was able to learn more about how to write about her field for the broader audience and explore fields that she never would have explored without science writing. She was then invited into Science Writers 2024 by the Council for the Advancement of Science Writers, where she was assigned a talk about particle physics, of which she had zero background, but she loved the talk anyway. She continued to teach workshops, including workshops here at Fred Hutch, ultimately returning to the Engage class as the instructor last fall. The culmination of the class is a talk series, and Samantha was spending a few months looking for venues and ultimately landed in Vermilion Art Gallery in Capitol Hill. She was introduced to the owner of Vermilion by Valerie Benti, who then introduced her to Retha, who then invited her to AWIS Seattle for an event on science communication. And this is the second version of the story. Members of AWIS Seattle do all kinds of very cool research, and their work has the potential for wide-ranging societal impact. But they likely haven't had many opportunities to learn how to communicate their work to the general public. So therefore, AWIS Seattle invited Samantha from UW Engage to come teach some SciComm fundamentals. Now, just by show of hands, which one of these tell you why you're here today and what you're gonna gain from the next 10 minutes? Show of hands if it's the first one, and show of hands if it's the second one. Cool, I agree. Things are going swimmingly so far. So the story on the left, right, it's a bit long-winded, and given the audience and the setting of this workshop, it contains several irrelevant details that aren't actually teaching you anything. All these details, yes, they're about my life, and so I'm invested in them, but they're not relevant actually to what you're trying to learn, right? Whereas on the right, it's succinct, there's a clear audience, and it trims out all the details that aren't relevant to the goal of the event. This framing also establishes the why of this event, right? What's at stake, or what you, the audience, can stand to gain from what I'm about to present. And honing details like this and being able to craft this story, I think, is the fundamental skill for successful science communication. So what is a story? If you've watched any movie in the past 50 years, you've probably been exposed to the 3-act structure, which goes a bit like this. And there's Act 1, which is the setup, where you're introduced to the everyday life of the character or world. And then in what is sometimes called the inciting incident, there's an opportunity that's presented. And the main character or the community or the world suddenly has a goal or a desire or the direction they want to go in. If you have seen any Disney princess movies or any musicals, it's this character's I want song. You know, Moana wants to know how far she can go, or Ariel wants to know how does that song go? Wants to be part of that world, exactly. And then Act 2 is the complicating action. This is when obstacles come up, conflicts come up, when the main character or the community or the hero has to overcome all these hurdles and experience a level of growth in order to reach Act 3, which is the resolution, where they either get what they want or they don't, and learn a big lesson. Either way, the everyday life at the very beginning is completely different now. And so how does this apply to science? Well, Randy Olson was a is a marine biologist professor turned Hollywood screenwriter and director. And he wrote an entire book called Houston, We Have a Narrative that I recommend everyone read about how scientists can use this 3-act structure in order to communicate the importance of their work to the general public. And he came up with this very useful acronym to really condense the 3-act structure to 3 letters. And he called it the and, but, therefore method, where Act 1, there is everyday life and an opportunity. Act 2, but there are obstacles and conflicts that may arise, and therefore the resolution. And so how does your science fit into this? These are just a couple of examples, and for the sake of time, I'm not gonna go like one by one into them, but the main takeaway that I want you all to glean from this is underlined here is your research topic or your field. And the first act is how things are now and how you want things to be. And the second act, or the but, are the gaps in knowledge or the practical limitations stopping you from getting the field where you think it can go. And then therefore, there's your research. Now, I know that I see some reactions. I know some of you are thinking, well, there's a lot of conflict and obstacles within my research. And that's true. But this framework is mainly from the perspective of wanting to introduce your work and its importance to someone who might not have heard about it before. You could also apply the ABT structure to a specific event within your research. For example, I wanted this protocol to improve, but there were certain funding limitations because of the cuts that have been going on. And so we all gathered together as scientists and protested and fought against the man and won, which is the story that I am telling myself to get through the next 4 years. But yeah, so that's the, sorry? Oh, never mind. But yeah, I hope that gives you a sense of what an arc or the general story structure looks like. And so now that you have a story structure, how do you tell it? In other words, how do you fill this structure with language that is accessible to a general audience? And in order to answer this, I want to introduce 3 concepts. The first is jargon, the second is distillation, and the third is analogies. Now, we all kind of live in jargon as scientists, right? We have technical terms. Every scientific talk, title, abstract, probably the topic itself is filled with technical terms and like 95% technical terms that anyone outside of the field wouldn't understand. That's jargon. There's also units and equations and words with multiple meanings, which I'll get to in just a second. And there's a lot of purposes for jargon, you know, like a lot of it is habit. We surround ourselves, we're in the lab every day, everybody uses jargon. Jargon is developed because it's efficient and it's also the most accurate way of portraying what we want to be talking about. And if I'm being honest, using jargon makes me feel like I know what I'm talking about. It makes me feel like I'm at like some kind of level playing field with my peers or with my professors. It makes me feel like a part of my community. And before taking the Engage class and thinking more about science communication, I would use jargon kind of as a I know what I'm talking about and you don't kind of thing when I was talking about the general ideas. But as Retha mentioned, that there's a level of detachment, right, between science and the general audience, scientists and the general audience, and this kind of defensiveness or this kind of use of jargon only serves to alienate the general audience, right? And if you're invited to an event where it's a general audience or to the public and you are billed as a scientist, the audience already trusts that you are the expert. You don't want to make them feel even more alienated, you know? And so this is just a list of technical terms from, in blue are like the last, are a list of terms from the last time I gave a workshop here at Fred Hutch. And then in red are terms from myself and other Engage members' research. And just as an example for how to replace jargon with, or work around jargon, for example, you could use, instead of nanoparticle, you could say tiny unit of matter, or to put in perspective, something that's 100,000 times thinner than a typical human hair. Or instead of phagocytosis, you can say when a cell eats other cells. The whole point is to use words that a general audience uses instead of words that would alienate them. And then there's units and equations. I have a confession to make. Even in the most scientific conferences, if there's a big equation like that on the slide, I tend to zone out. And so if I, a trained PhD student, will zone out, imagine how much you've lost the general audience, right? And so, and also, we're all scientists here, but how many of you know all of these SI units? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of, oh, congrats to the people that do, but, but I did not know what CD was, or I knew it as cadmium, but apparently it's coefficient of drag or candela. And that in itself is an example of the fact that even within the scientific community, one thing, one term or one acronym can mean an entirely different thing to different scientists, right? And that comes up to the next term, the next kind of part, kind of jargon, which is words with multiple meanings. Now, I think of protein and I think this. People who go to the gym, for whatever reason, think of protein and think protein shakes. Same with the word model. The general audience might see this when they think the word model, when we really mean an animal model or an AI model. And this might be silly interpretations but they're still important to consider. Your audience may not need everything spelled out, but if they get hung up on a word, they will get hung up on that word and they won't actually follow what you're saying. Now, this isn't entirely to say to avoid jargon at all costs. It's okay to use it if you do it right. What I was mentioning earlier about reframing or rewording the jargon to rewording the concept with words that you know your audience will understand. And then if you need to define it, that's okay too. Bill Nye, the science guy, defined a lot of scientific concepts or scientific words. But the important thing is to provide these definitions as a means to invite the audience into your story rather than to give them a vocabulary lesson. These are just some practical tools you can use to define jargon. There's Dejargonizer by sciencepublic.com. There's also XKCD, who is just like an excellent comic artist. He created an entire diagram of a rocket ship using only the 1,000 most common words. So this is US space teams up, go, or 5. Yeah. And rewording jargon is just a form of distillation, which is, in chemistry or in beer, is the process of extracting a liquid you want from a liquid mixture. In science communication, it's extracting the most important components out of something that is complex. And really, there's a difference between distilling and dumbing down. And really, the difference for me is the approach that I have to the audience. Dumbing down means what I'm telling the audience is this content is too hard for you to understand, and so I'm not gonna even touch that. Whereas distilling is digesting ideas into relevant, digestible chunks, again, inviting the audience into the conversation. Just out of the sake of time, you can also, I'm assuming there's gonna be a recording or there's the key part that I want you to take away from this slide is really get to know your audience and what they understand, really make it a conversation rather than a lecture. And one really powerful tool to do that are analogies. So analogies compare something unknown and complicated to something familiar and understandable. So I work a lot with DNA, and for my public talk, I had to make a distinction between genomes and DNA. And the analogy that I used was I compared the genome to a book of fairy tales, and the DNA to the alphabet that the book is written in. And the reason I chose fairy tales instead of instruction manual was because I needed a way to introduce nuance. I needed to introduce genomic DNA and synthetic DNA. Genomic DNA I described as the words that you would find in the fairy tale canon. And I wanted to explain that we've now developed the technology to create our own synthetic DNA that's not found in the genome, and that we could write really whatever we wanted. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I'm sure that anyone here who works with DNAs or genomes can find any number of holes in this analogy. But the idea is to really remember what your story is and what you're trying and how you're trying to invite your audience. And this is just some snippets from the particle physics. My favorite analogy was the speaker, Hitoshi Murayama, compared dark matter to his mom as a way of telling all of us that dark matter is the way that we were all materially brought together. Yeah, and then he also compared proton colliders versus electron colliders with cherry pies versus cherry pit pies. And these analogies were the only way I was able to write an article about particle physics. So thank you so much for listening.
All right. So last time I gave a workshop, someone came up to me afterwards and said, "That was great, but what was your name? You never said what it was." My name is Teresa Flores. The other person on this slide is Valerie Benty, who's not here this evening, but we normally do this workshop together, so they stayed in the slides. We're both comedians with backgrounds in science. Valerie works in bio at the UW. I'm currently working as an educator, have done so for about 15 years, been a stand-up comedian for about 5. And the third point is on this slide mostly because I borrowed it from another workshop I do called Dungeons and Derivatives. But it's also there because it has rule of 3. We'll see more about that later, which makes this foreshadowing, which we'll also see more about that later. Okay, but the third point on the slide still is relevant because this is the speedrun edition of this workshop. Valerie and I normally have about 90 minutes. I've got 13. So I've kind of boiled it down to having different goals with different audiences, then common comedic tools we can use with each of those audiences, and how to find and develop material. Okay, so start with a classic here. Picture a frazzled first-year physics teacher, 22 years old, over a decade before I was officially a comedian. Bell was about to ring, hadn't assigned homework yet, so I said to my students, "Go home, tell someone this joke, and explain to them why it's funny." So 2 cats of the same mass are standing on a slanted tin roof. Which one slides off first? It's the one with the lesser mu. And I don't expect any of y'all to remember your high school physics class, so I will also explain the joke. Mu is the coefficient of friction, describes how easily 2 surfaces slide against each other, and would, in fact, describe which cat slid off first. Okay. So here, this is actually one of the proudest moments of my teaching career because my student came to me the next day and said her parents, who were teachers, said it was a really great homework assignment. All right, so tools to use with students. Your primary goal is to convey the content. And so this is one of the only times where the joke is actually funnier after you explain it. Because having a joke really encourages your students to engage with the content because they want to get the joke. Everybody wants to get the joke. And so, and you know that they'll get it when they can explain it to someone else. All right. So tools to use with students. What these have in common is that they are quick, they're punchy, you can work them into a bunch of different lessons. So puns are easy to remember, and I'm all for teachers embracing cringiness. I definitely have. Exaggeration. It's silly, it's funny, but it also really helps drive home certain mathematical concepts. Like when I ask a student, what's 73 billion and 24 divided by 73 billion and 24? They laugh, but they also remember, hey, anything divided by itself is 1. Okay. And then see, repetition. In a lot of education settings, you are set up to see the same people for a regular period of time, which really sets you up to do running gags. I tell my students all the time that despite doing calculus for almost 25 years now, if I don't write down the product rule when I do it, I'll get it wrong. And so not only is that a subtle reminder to them that like, hey, you don't have to do everything in your head, it's also just a nice running gag that they're looking for whenever we do the product rule. And the rule of 3, I said we'd mention it earlier. I said we'd come back to it. This one is as much about cadence as it is about content. Both education and comedy are as much about delivery as anything else. And there's something about 3 things that just rings better. 2 feels cut off, 4 is too many to remember, 3 is just right. Okay. All right, so we started off with a pun, and now let's take a traditional joke format. I'm so adjective that I once verbed. It's very adaptable. So I am so clumsy that I once spilled a bottle of pH indicator solution and somehow managed to sit in the puddle, which was unfortunate, but I now have scientific confirmation that my backside is not basic. We still got to a pun. We were going to get there eventually. Okay. All right, so when you're dealing with the general public, your primary goal is to make yourself relatable. Because as others have brought up so far this evening, scientists have this elitist antisocial stigma, generally unearned, but it means that a lot of the general public doesn't think that they can connect to science or scientists. So there's a big fear of not getting it that's a roadblock to communication. So a nerdy joke that is related to what you want to convey in a way that's accessible serves as a gateway. Because if they understand your joke, they feel empowered to understand the rest of what you're saying. So comedy and science are everywhere and for everyone, and tying them together really helps you build a connection with your audience. So tools to use with the public. The theme of these tools is leveling the playing field, like we said. We want to build a relationship between us and the audience, and also between their current knowledge and whatever it is you want to show them. So puns, again, relatable, whether you love them or hate them. And since our goal with the public is relatability, they're just a good tool. Juxtaposition, unexpected contrasts are funny and also builds connections between new topics and familiar ones. Special relativity sounds very scary, but when you contrast the scary sounding name with the idea that the clock app on your phone runs more slowly as it is falling to the ground, it's less intimidating. Still weird, but less intimidating. Okay. The last two tools go together. Giving yourself a hard time is relatable. Giving groups who are not in a position of power a hard time really shouldn't be relatable. If we want to show the public that the science community is welcoming rather than intimidating, the last thing we want to do is start hurling insults. And this is hard because a lot of popular stand-up comedy these days is very mean-spirited and antagonistic. And I guess that makes people laugh, but it's at odds with the goal of making people comfortable and open to learning about new ideas. So let's see here. Okay. Yeah, slides. Okay. So a third audience, the rest of the science community, y'all out here, we can get a little bit more esoteric with them. Sorry, I'm keeping an eye on my time. I've applied for the same job on 4 separate occasions, and I've never gotten it. And while I know the saying goes that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity, I have a physics degree from MIT that forces me to acknowledge the fact that it's also quantum mechanics. Okay, so let's see. When you're talking to other members of the science community, there's less of a content barrier than there is with students when you're a teacher. There's less of a relatability barrier than with the general public. So now the goal is to make yourself stand out from your peers. Your jokes can be more obscure, like that one. And while humor is less necessary to engage with your audience, it's still definitely welcome. So tools to use with the science community. The theme of these tools is structure. The other tools we've discussed can really be placed anywhere in a talk. These require more planning with regards to where they fit into your overall narrative, except for, of course, puns. Puns are always good. They are the highest form of communication, and I will not be accepting counter arguments at this time. Okay. This is also a callback to the repetition tool. And speaking of callbacks, a longer form presentation like you might be giving at a conference or something like that, it's a great opportunity to use these tools that require more structure. Like foreshadowing a punchline in advance or calling back to an earlier punchline. Yeah. Interestingly, the exact opposite of foreshadowing, the element of surprise, also is a great tool in this context, especially if your research had, let's say, unexpected results. Surprise is a much more positive way to frame an outcome than disappointment, and bringing a little bit of levity to the situation can really affect the overall impression that your audience leaves with. Okay. All right, so comedic tools recap. So these are the tools we've discussed so far. I also just really wanted to say the phrase Chekhov's pun, which I thought I was the first person to come up with, but then when I looked it up, I was not. So foreshadowing a pun in advance, setting it up, and then you must come back to it later. So here, lost my point here. If you, I will also have a QR code for these slides on the last slide of the presentation, so don't worry about writing these things down now. if you want this list. Also, bear in mind, this is far from exhaustive. There's so many other tools we can use, especially if we consider the non-verbal aspects of comedy. I work in small education settings with small groups, and as a stand-up comedian, I don't make a lot of slide decks, probably a lot fewer than many of you out there. And so when I do get a chance to make one, I tend to have fun with the visuals. I don't know if you've noticed so far. And I also would like to point out the irony of the fact that talking about visuals as a comedic tool, this is my only slide that doesn't have any graphics on it. Okay. Okay. I do also, while we've been talking about tools to use in comedy, take a moment to talk about what not to do, because in the context of science communication, even if your primary goal in the moment is humor, your role is as a scientist, as an educator, rather than a comedian. So I would advise that you don't tell a joke just for the sake of telling a joke. These workshops are the best of both worlds for me because I am in a superposition of educator and comedian states. So any jokes I tell during a workshop are simultaneously trying to make you laugh and also serving as examples of the content. In any case, the image on the slide is a reference to the Big Bang Theory. The discussion of the depiction of their depiction of physicists merits an entirely separate presentation in and of itself. One character is giving a talk and is told to lead with a joke, so he decides on one about a spherical chicken in a vacuum. And while I applaud them for doing their research because I knew from the first line of the scene what the joke was going to end up being, in reality, it wouldn't have been a good intro. It would feel forced because it was forced. It was tacked on at the last second. He didn't write the joke himself. And while that wouldn't automatically rule it out, but in this particular case, the fact that he didn't write the joke himself is exacerbated by the fact that it wasn't at all related to his talk. Humor works best when it's personal and ties in with your overall story and narrative. So, how do we build that narrative? These are words that as scientists we're all familiar with. Observation. Funny things happen everywhere if you are looking at them and frame them in the right way. That thing about spilled the pH indicator solution and sat on it, yeah, I did that. Applying unsuccessfully for the same job 4 times, I did that as well. So the weird thing that happened in lab, like the thing that you would tell someone about if they ask you how work was that day, that's what you turn your funny intro into. What you turn into your funny intro, rather. Experiment, tell jokes to your friends, find ways to slip them into casual conversation. This helps you get a feel for what's organic versus what feels forced. Please note that there is sometimes a very fine line between not fake and too real. I used to work at a science museum, and at a meeting, someone mentioned that an exhibit was crumbling on the inside. Without thinking, I replied, "Aren't we all?" And the response to that was, "Teresa, it is too early for this." Okay. In any case, test your jokes out. You cannot be certain if they are funny or not until they've been observed. And looking at this visual, I realized, Samantha, sorry, I did have equations in these slides. Okay. Okay. And then here. Okay. So research, I am admittedly being a little bit unscientific with my distinction between experiment and research, but rule of 3. When you want to give your friends and family a break from your jokes, there is a lot of inspiration and feedback to be found online. Comedy and science communication both have active conversations, active communities, and there's definitely crossover between the two. There are far more social media sites than there used to be. And I know I've moved around a lot as the landscape has, say, changed. The screenshots on this slide are very old. So test out different sites until you find one that works for you. Personally, at the moment, I'm mostly on Threads right now. Okay. Closing thoughts. All right, so the official closing thoughts, where I remind you to think about your audience, your goals, what tools will best help you accomplish those goals. That's officially the closing thoughts. The message I really want to leave y'all with is this. Some people in your audience, be they students, members of the general public, or even other members of the science community, might be hesitant to learn more about science because they think they might not be smart enough. And sorry, my timer's apparently faster than yours. Some of you all out there might be hesitant to use humor because you think you might not be funny enough. But both science and comedy really are for everyone. And if you can think of a third thing to go with science and comedy here, please tell me because I think this workshop needs a better punchline. Thank you very much.
So Audra, got lost on her way here, and so we think she's on her way, but we're not sure. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions with Samantha and Teresa. So if you have a question, those of you in the room, if you'll come use the microphone, and those of you on Zoom, if you will put your question in the chat, and then we will deliver it to our speakers. Okay. Yes, come on. And while we're getting our first question, I have a question for Samantha. So can you tell us a little bit more about the class that you teach? How long has it been going, and how many students usually attend, and what area or what grade? Are they undergraduates, postdocs?
Yeah, so they're mostly graduate
Yeah.
students. Hello, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's a graduate student course, and so we
Okay.
have master's and PhD students. We do have shorter workshops for postdocs or undergrads, depending on people who reach out to us. As far as, well, let's see. Yeah, the class is typically like between 12 to 15 people, and so it's a nice tight-knit group of people that get to really know each other and know each other's work, and it's really a breadth of people. So when I took the class, it was people from fishery sciences, myself that I'm in molecular engineering, there's people in forestry, there's people who are studying astrochemistry, all sorts of really cool things. And we also learn a lot about improv. So I was excited to see what Audra was going to bring with us.
Hi, my name is Rajat. I really liked your presentation. Thank you for that. So I teach smartphones and technology to seniors in senior centers, and I cannot gauge what expertise level they are at. So I do not know how to create my presentation material. And then even if I actually create it for everyone, on the day of the presentation, it's hard for me to gauge if they are understanding things or not, or should I bring it down a little bit more. So how do you do that?
I guess in terms of, so, this on? No? Okay. So the question is how to gauge where your audience is at, like in the moment?
Yeah.
Okay. So like working in education, I think a lot of it is asking more open-ended questions, because the instinct when everybody says like, oh, do you get that? Does this make sense? The instinct is always to say yes. So have it be like, not necessarily like completely open-ended, but have it be like offer two choices that aren't yes, no. Like, do you want to spend more time on this topic, or do you feel comfortable to move on with another topic? Do you have a specific question about this? Choices, but structured in a way that people feel more comfortable, not just saying like, oh yeah, I get it, because they want to look like they get it.
And do you know before you come to a presentation, what kind of audience you can expect? Like, for example, even today, did you know if, what kind of audience you are expecting?
I should have said that. Like the answer to that question, do I know what kind of audience to expect? And that is never. So, sorry.
Thank you.
So when we're selecting students for our class, we typically have a section of the application where we ask them about their familiarity with science communication concepts. And so that's a sort of avenue that we can gauge their experience with it. But there's kind of two things that I would learn to use in order to gauge whether or not people were understanding, even for like other classes that I've TA'd for actual scientific content. The first is like really allowing myself to like look out into the classroom and pay attention to confused faces. And I really have a hard time with eye contact and awkward silences. And so it's hard for me to really note that, but pushing myself to say, actually, like there's something to pay attention to here, like something isn't clicking, has taught me to be present in the moment which I know might sound weird, like really hippie woo woo, but like it really does take that. And sometimes it's even going up to someone after the class and offering different avenues for feedback. So we like to send out surveys between like in the first few weeks and then like a few weeks later, just to gauge in case people aren't comfortable like vocalizing it in person.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Sam. My question, I guess, is for both of you. In an era of increasingly like online communication, how have you adapted your storytelling or like engagement styles through the medium of like video conferences or like Zoom meetings, basically?
It's definitely been a challenge. I think we've tried to come up with ways to convert the interactive portions to work with some kind of break room layout, or like respond in the chat, or respond in the those websites where you can text the answer to a little pool. Just yeah, in terms of how we've adapted our storytelling, it's been a challenge to learn the specifics of each platform, and that's something that we're constantly thinking about and engaged as to how to adapt our curriculum in order to accommodate for that for students who want to go into podcasting or go into video making. We've tried to add that in, but those are entire classes within themselves, right? And so yeah, I think acknowledging that that's a new field of expertise, and looking for experts or resources to sort of refer our students to. The UW has a really good program in the UW library has a really good program to introduce people to podcast production, and so we were able to introduce our students to that.
Oh yeah, that's hard. I have done online comedy shows and it's honestly kind of terrible because it's like not being able to get as a comedian, feedback in the moment is so huge. But I think a lot of that is like moving to like maybe less Zoom meetings, but a lot of comedy is like now like more asynchronous. Like it's really hard to like to become a successful comedian without having some kind of social media presence. And so having like snippets and things, so like having shorter form content that can be posted to social media successfully, because I think that like the kind of like stand-up comedy with like an online audience, I think is just never actually going to be the same. So it's just kind of like saying, okay, I'm going to do my shows, but then also I have essentially separate content that I post in social media.
Hi, we have a question from Laura. How do you think about communication of complicated scientific concepts to non-scientists? What tricks do you have for making difficult or complex concepts approachable?
Yeah, I mean, analogies have really helped, because I think that allows me to try to find some kind of cultural reference point or some kind of common like knowledge base. In a lot of the talks that I give, I use a lot of like pop culture references, and a lot of the times there's a very like, how do you do fellow kids vibe to the talks, which is just like a nature of the field of science communication, and I'm trying to get better at it. But yeah, like I try to see it as a way to see what my audience or even just my family is interested in. My dad is a very big basketball fan. I know nothing about basketball, and the only times things have clicked for him in terms of my research is when I've tried to make some kind of basketball analogy, you know? Yeah.
I think with me, like in terms of like knowing your audience and knowing when it's okay to be a little bit wrong, like that when my students are like, well, how come you explain this differently from my math teacher at school, and it makes sense when you did it. I'm like, because your math teacher is being exact. They're being, for lack of a better word, a little bit pedantic. And I'm okay with like you need to know enough to know how to do the problem, and you don't need to know it at the level that a math major knows it at. And so being like knowing the right level of wrong to be, right? Not like completely conceptually wrong, but saying like, I don't have to explain it to this level of detail. I can get to this level of detail and fudge this last little bit, and they're going to get it to for the purposes of what they need it for.
Thank you.
Hi. My question is, how do you stop yourself from rambling, especially when put on the spot or in like a spontaneous interaction?
I am still figuring that out. But one of our guest speakers, because we're really fortunate to have a lot of guest speakers in our class, his answer or his advice for the Q&A portion, which always makes me so nervous, as you can see, is to come into a Q&A portion with what are the 3 takeaways that I want my audience to have. I totally forgot his advice until just now, so I'm not using it correctly. But the 3 points, and having kind of like the mental agility to somehow connect to your question, anyone's question, to back to those 3 points, can sometimes help.
And this is actually a point that Audra was going to bring up if she was able to make it tonight, that like active listening is really important in all forms of communication. And so if you are genuinely actively listening to what the person you're talking to is saying, you're not going to talk too much because you want to hear what they're saying. So that's like, so like say your piece and then be like, and then legitimately wait for a response and not just kind of like charge ahead. So there's
A question from Kate. How do you address fear of science by audience?
I'm at a little bit of an advantage for this because I'm the least intimidating person on the face of the planet. And so I think that a lot of times, like that's, and I mean, in the, like, on a serious note, like the point of the talk about like being relatable, that like, if someone can relate to you and not be afraid of you, they will be less afraid of what you're saying. And so a lot of it is, yeah, finding connections. It doesn't have to be about the science, and like the self-deprecation I talked about, that's half of that's a bit, half of that is like, making sure that like my audience doesn't think like I'm not going to understand her, or like I can't relate to that.
Thank you.
Thanks for a great talk. My name is Lael. I totally get the accessible science communication. What I don't get is the jokes. How do you even think about starting to make a joke? I just feel like I take my job and my content so literally, and just thinking about it that way. And what are like some exercises or things or resources that you suggest to start, thinking about how to like write a joke?
Okay, I can't remember the name of it, but if you like Google how to write stand-up comedy PDF, there's a 45-page document out there somewhere that has a bunch of like writing exercises and stuff. But a lot of it is just kind of training yourself to the mindset, like tell yourself every day, I'm going to look for something that's funny. And a lot of it is a reactionary thing that's something I've said in a lot of my stand-up bits and just in general, is that if I'm laughing about something, I'm not crying about it. So honestly, like things that would otherwise like make you upset or like make you feel vulnerable, there's probably something funny about it if you phrase it if you think about it the right way. So things that you are I would say probably most of like the things that I joke about are things that I'm either self-conscious about, or if you saw my thing, it's like things that if I didn't joke about them, I would probably be upset by. So it's a place to start. But also, yeah, look up like, yeah, it's something like writing stand-up comedy PDF, and there's a bunch of really good exercises. It's like the one I'm thinking of is like literally 45 pages long.
I have a question. So as a presenter, and sometimes it's difficult to put work together to make it a presentation. knowing the audience and dealing with deadlines and also putting results to your research. What tip do you have in crafting the narrative and creating presentation so that you don't get too stressed about it and you actually have time to explain what you're presenting?
Do folks know Aaron Sorkin? He wrote The Social Network and The West Wing, and his sometimes his writing is pretty inaccessible, but like he's a very prolific writer. And his definition of a story is a character wants something and there's something in the way. And so what is the character going to do? And really that's all there is. And so I think if you can boil down like the very core goal that you're trying to accomplish, then you can think of all the things that have gotten in the way, and then you can, yeah, and then you can frame it in terms of that, and frame everything you've done as ways to overcome those obstacles. Because people are trying to root for you anyway, you know?
And I didn't originally have an answer to this question, but you reminded me of an exercise that's really useful for that. It's like whatever is the topic that you want to talk about, how would you explain it in 30 seconds? How would you explain it in 15 seconds? How would you explain it in 5 seconds? And so that's going to be how you get to what Samantha was saying is like, what is the one takeaway you really want? Okay.
Are there any other questions? If not, I think obviously Audra didn't make it, so we hope she's out there somewhere and getting her way back home. But at this point in time, oh, we do have one more, sorry.
Yeah, we have one more question online from Kate. Have you ever had someone in the audience strongly disagree with you, such as vaccine, AI, funding for science?
We have had a few interesting Q&A sessions because, yeah, like I said, at the end of each of the classes, we have a talk series, and at the end of each of those talk series, and my students worked with everything from AI to global warming to vaccines to you name it, every sort of controversial topic out there. And I think sort of similar to what Theresa was saying is like really trying to come at it from a perspective of curiosity of like, oh, what have you heard about this? Or like, what's your understanding of this? And then we can work from there. Not necessarily from the point of like, what have you heard about this and what you've heard is wrong, but like, how can we move from where we're both at to a place of understanding? There's often not too much time to go into detail. And so what I try to encourage my students to do is just know where they're coming from so that they can really be open to where the other person is coming from and not feel like threatened in their own position.
And there's back to active communication, there is a tool in that nature that usually if somebody has like a controversial take on a topic and they're being argumentative about it, that they're just defensive because they've fought so much pushback before, and rightly or wrongly or whatever, but like if you have the time to have a longer conversation, the acronym is GIVE. So, and at the moment I am blanking for what it stands for, but it's give. If you Google GIVE active listening, it's like tools to have a more difficult conversation.
I've also often found that the more strongly worded or the I don't know, the scarier questions or more rash responses that we've gotten from audiences, a lot of the times it feels like they're speaking from a place of fear. They're like, because global warming is scary. Like the fact that like AI is taking over so much of our like personal lives is really scary. And so really meeting them with that, one of my students was really good at meeting the person where they were at, where like they said something like that I'll never forget, where it's just like I work with AI every day and I'm scared too. um, how can we move through this together, which is a lot harder to do, especially because scientists aren't trained to deal with any kind of social interaction, let alone any difficult social interaction. And so, yeah, it does require a level of bravery and courage, but really prioritizing, I think both of our talks today prioritize like connection with the audience and using and really presenting science as not as a way of setting some kind of barrier or some kind of pedestal that I'm putting myself on, but as a place to welcome people into.
And last question, quick one. What is your favorite go-to science joke?
One of them is in, okay, so this is a cop-out answer, but I'll give you two, one that I wrote and one that I didn't. Okay, so the one that I didn't write is, Doppler is pulled over by a cop for running a red light, and he says, "No, officer, you can't pull me over for running the red light because it looks blue to me." But then he got a speeding ticket instead. And the one that I did write was the most validating experience I've ever had was when one of my students told me, "Thank you so much, Teresa, for making physics actually make sense." But the joke is on her because it actually doesn't.
So at this point in time, please help join me in thanking our speakers. So I think they will both be around after the program, so if you have more questions, please come up and chat with them. We also try to video the programs through our Zoom, and if we are able then to get it edited, it will be on our website under events, and there's a little tab for past events, so you should be able to go back and look at these slides again. So again, thank you very much. At this point in time, it's time for our raffles. And so all of you should have had an opportunity to enter your name in either this bag to get a one-year membership to National and Seattle AWIS, and it's either for a new membership or a renewing membership. And if you were interested in an ORCA membership, then you had a chance to put your name in this bag. And Samantha, I'm going to have you draw. Terry Miller. Okay, come see me afterwards. Holly Martin. Okay, so you come see me afterwards. Thank you. Okay, so I just want to end by giving you a reminder of some of the upcoming events. So May 31st, coming up very fast, the deadline for the Martha Feldman Award, and these are nominations for ORCA for an outstanding regulatory or clinical professional or somebody who helps those people. So you can submit the nominations to orcanorthwest.org. There's actually a copy of the nomination form. It's not difficult, and we really do encourage you to either nominate yourself or someone who would be deserving of this award. And most importantly, I'm really hope that you'll put on your calendar June 17th. It is the annual AWIS banquet. It's a really inspiring evening, and we hear from our 3 award winners. You'll also meet a whole community of companies, organizations, and individuals who support women in science. You can buy your tickets now. You can see through brown paper tickets. You can get that link on our website. And as was mentioned earlier, if your company is interested in being a sponsor, it means you get extra visibility and complimentary seats. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us. Please stick around. You can chat with our speakers, chat with each other, help yourself to more food. We will be having our banquet in June. We take a break in July, and then the AWIS programs start up again in September. So if you're interested in being on any of our committees, we would welcome you. Please come talk to us. So again, thanks for joining us. Have a nice evening.